I knocked on the door of the tree dome, loudly enough to catch Sandy's attention. A moment later, the door swung open, revealing the curious face of the squirrel scientist. "Howdy there," Sandy exclaimed, her southern accent immediately noticeable. "And who might you be?" I smiled at Sandy, finding her friendly demeanor endearing. "Hi, Sandy," I replied with a wave. "My name is Fexa. I've been exploring around Bikini Bottom and thought I'd drop by and say hello." Sandy's eyes lit up with excitement, a broad smile spreading across her face. She was clearly always up for meeting new people. "Well, ain't that sweet of ya?" she said, her voice warm and welcoming. Come on in, come on in. I sure do love making new friends." I thanked Sandy and stepped into the tree dome, my eyes wandering around the high-tech interior. Just about every surface was covered in scientific equipment, and there were numerous contraptions and gadgets scattered throughout. Sandy led me into the main living area, gesturing for me to take a seat on a surprisingly comfortable couch. "Make yourself at home, darling," she said, her accent thicker than ever. "Can I offer you something to drink? Sweet tea, maybe? Or something stronger if you fancy it." Sandy raised an eyebrow at my request, but quickly chuckled. "Coconut milk, huh? Sure enough, that's doable. I reckon I can whip something up for you," she said, her Texan charm still present in her voice. She disappeared into the kitchen, rummaging through her fridge for a moment before returning with a tall glass of chilled coconut milk. She handed the glass to me with a smile. "There you go, darling. One nice cold glass of coconut milk, just for you," she said, her eyes twinkling mischievously. I thanked her and took a sip of the coconut milk, its creamy texture and sweet taste delighting my palate. "This is really good," I said, genuinely impressed. "I have to admit, I was expecting just regular milk, but this is a pleasant surprise." Sandy chuckled, clearly amused by my reaction. "I always try to mix things up a bit, sugar. Being a scientist, I like to tinker with recipes and experiment with different ingredients. Coconut milk's a personal favorite of mine." I nodded, my curiosity piqued by her statement. I leaned in a bit, eager to learn more about her scientific endeavors. "So you're a scientist, huh? What kind of projects are you working on right now?" Sandy's eyes lit up at the question, her enthusiasm evident. She leaned back in her chair, clearly eager to share. "Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm currently working on a prototype for a new underwater breathing device. Something that can allow me to stay submerged for longer periods without the need for the air tank I carry around all the time." My eyes widened in fascination. The idea of an underwater breathing device sounded both useful and revolutionary. "That sounds incredible," I said, my voice filled with admiration. "So, it would essentially function like gills, right? Allowing you to absorb oxygen from the water instead of from an air tank?" Sandy nodded, clearly excited about the project. "Exactly! I've been tinkering around with some materials and designs, and I think I'm getting close to a viable prototype. I just need to run a few more tests and make some adjustments, and hopefully it'll be ready to use soon enough." As Sandy continued to talk about her underwater breathing device, a random memory suddenly popped into my head. A vague recollection of an episode where Sandy and SpongeBob had gotten married. I couldn't help but chuckle silently at the thought. It was definitely a memorable and unusual moment in the show, and I couldn't help but wonder how it had happened. "Hey, Sandy," I interjected, cutting into her explanation. "I couldn't help but remember an episode where, well, you and SpongeBob got married, if I recall correctly." Sandy froze mid-sentence, a look of surprise and embarrassment washing over her face. "Ack! I almost forgot about that," she exclaimed, her cheeks turning a brighter shade of pink. "That was a strange episode, to say the least." I chuckled, seeing her flustered expression. It was endearing to see such a confident character like Sandy get embarrassed about something. "It certainly was unique," I said, a smile playing on my lips. "How exactly did that happen, anyway?" "It seemed like a rather spontaneous decision." Sandy let out a sheepish laugh, rubbing the back of her neck awkwardly. "Well, you see, it was a combination of a lot of factors. SpongeBob and I had been spending a lot of time together, and I guess we both just got carried away in the moment. We were in a place called Texas Reef, and the situation there sort of forced us to, well, get hitched." I raised an eyebrow, my curiosity piqued by her explanation. "Texas Reef, huh? I don't even want to know what kind of shenanigans led to that situation. I took another sip of my coconut milk, letting her continue the story. Sandy chuckled again, shaking her head at the memory. You got that right, darling. Texas Reef is a wild place, and SpongeBob and I somehow ended up getting roped into a mess there. It's a long story, but the gist of it is that we got forced to marry due to some legal complexities and the locals' peculiar customs. I nodded, intrigued by the absurdity of it all. It was yet another one of those classic episodes that defied logic but somehow made perfect sense in the world of SpongeBob. That sounds like quite the adventure, I said with a smile. I assume the marriage didn't last long, though. Sandy shrugged, a rueful grin on her face. Thankfully, no. We managed to get it annulled shortly after. SpongeBob and I are just best friends, nothing more. But it was a memorable experience, to say the least. I chuckled, imagining how bizarre it must have been to be married, even if only for a brief period of time. I can imagine. And I suppose SpongeBob was completely on board with the whole thing, as usual? Sandy rolled her eyes affectionately, a hint of laughter in her voice. Oh, you know SpongeBob? He was excited about the whole thing, thinking it was the best thing ever. But deep down, I don't think he fully understood the weight of marriage. He's a sweet guy, but he can be a bit naive sometimes. I nodded, imagining SpongeBob's wide-eyed enthusiasm. He would probably be overjoyed at the prospect of getting married, not truly understanding the implications of it all. That sounds about right. He always does things with a childlike innocence, doesn't he? I spent a wonderful hour in Sandy's tree dome, learning about her scientific projects and listening to her tales of adventures. As time wound down and it was time to say goodbye, I gave Sandy a warm hug. It was really nice meeting you, Sandy, I said with a smile. You're incredibly smart and adventurous. Sandy hugged me back, her embrace strong and warm. Ah, shucks, darling. It was mighty nice meeting you too. You're a real gem, you know that? She pulled back, her eyes gleaming with affection. I smiled at her kind words, feeling a sense of connection and friendship with the squirrel. I'll be sure to stop by next time I'm in Bikini Bottom, I said, waving farewell. See you soon, Sandy. Sandy waved back, her cheerful expression never wavering. You know you're welcome anytime, sugar. Come on back if you ever need a little more Texan charm in your life. I left the tree dome with a sense of contentment and excitement. Meeting Sandy and learning about her life and adventures had filled me with a childlike glee. I walked down the vibrant streets of Bikini Bottom feeling happy and content. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow over the underwater city. I took a deep breath, appreciating the peaceful atmosphere. I strolled into the familiar neighborhood where SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick resided. The streets were quiet, the houses in various states of disarray, reflecting the distinct personalities of their inhabitants. I looked around, admiring the familiar landscape. It felt nice to be in the neighborhood where so many iconic SpongeBob moments had taken place. As I passed by SpongeBob's pineapple house, I hesitated for a moment, contemplating whether to knock on his door. It was getting late after all, and I didn't want to disturb him if he was already asleep. However, my need to see and talk to another one of my favorite characters won over my hesitation. I approached the door and knocked gently, hoping SpongeBob would still be awake. After a moment or two, the door creaked open to reveal SpongeBob's cheerful face. He looked a little disheveled, as if I had woken him up from a nap, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. Fexa, he exclaimed, his voice full of his usual enthusiasm. What brings you over? I smiled at SpongeBob's cheerful greeting. Despite his slightly groggy appearance, his energy was infectious. Hey, SpongeBob, I replied. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Hope I didn't wake you up. SpongeBob chuckled, rubbing his eyes sleepily. No, you're fine. I was just taking a little nap. Come on in. He opened the door wider, gesturing for me to enter his pineapple house. I thanked him and stepped inside the pineapple house. The familiar surroundings and wacky decorations immediately caught my attention. From the talking fish hanging on the wall to the plethora of jellyfish lamps, it was all very distinctly SpongeBob. I took a seat on the couch, feeling a sense of comfort and familiarity. SpongeBob plopped down beside me on the couch, a cheerful grin on his face. So, what brings you over tonight? Just wanted to hang out or something specific? I shrugged, a smile playing on my lips. Just wanted to say hi, really. I've been exploring Bikini Bottom today, meeting all sorts of interesting characters, and I couldn't resist paying a visit to my favorite pineapple-dwelling sponge. SpongeBob's cheeks turned pink from the compliment. He rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, clearly flattered by my words. Oh, shucks, Fexa. Thanks for saying that. It's nice to know I'm your favorite. He paused for a moment, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. So, who else did you meet today, if you don't mind me asking? I chuckled at his flustered reaction, amused by his charm. I met Sandy first. She was working on some kind of underwater breathing device. It was really impressive. I paused for a moment, reflecting on my other interactions. Then I went to Plankton's restaurant and helped him and Karen out with their anniversary. SpongeBob's expression changed to one of surprise and interest. You helped Plankton and Karen celebrate their anniversary? Whoa, that's amazing! I never would have thought Plankton would need anyone's help with something like that. He chuckled, clearly impressed. I nodded, a grin on my face. Yeah, it was definitely eventful. Each character had their own unique stories and adventures. I feel like I've learned so much about this town. I turned to SpongeBob, my eyes sparkling. So, what about you? Anything exciting happened today? SpongeBob shrugged, his grin widening. Not too much? Just the usual shenanigans with Patrick. We built a sandcastle, tried to find some buried treasure, and then ended up playing hide-and-seek all day. You know, the typical SpongeBob stuff, he chuckled, clearly amused by his own mundane activities. I chuckled, picturing SpongeBob and Patrick running around town causing trouble, with SpongeBob's naive innocence and Patrick's childish whims. Sounds like your day was exactly what I would expect from you. Just having fun and goofing off with Patrick. It's what you do best. SpongeBob chuckled again, clearly proud of his carefree attitude. Yep, that's me, always up for a good time. And Patrick's the perfect partner for all kinds of shenanigans. He paused for a moment, a sly grin spreading across his face. But you know what else I'm good at? I raised an eyebrow, curious about what SpongeBob was implying. I had a feeling it would be something ridiculous, but I couldn't help but ask. What's that? What else are you good at? SpongeBob leaned in, a mischievous glint in his eyes. He lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. I'm a master at throwing the best parties in Bikini Bottom. Nobody can throw a bash quite like SpongeBob SquarePants. I couldn't help but laugh at SpongeBob's boastful claim. It was so in character for him to brag about something like that. Oh, really? You're the party king of Bikini Bottom, huh? SpongeBob nodded, a confident grin on his face. You bet! I've thrown parties of all sorts. Birthday parties, Halloween parties, Valentine's Day parties, you name it. And each one is better than the last. I chuckled, shaking my head in amusement. Wow, you really do take your party throwing seriously. I've never seen anyone quite so passionate about throwing a good bash. I smiled at SpongeBob's question. I had to admit, I was feeling a little hungry after my eventful day exploring the town. You know what, SpongeBob? A Krabby Patty sounds great right about now. SpongeBob leaped up from the couch, his eyes lighting up. You got it! I'll whip up a Krabby Patty for you faster than you can say, "Ah, who lives in a pineapple under the sea?" I laughed, impressed by SpongeBob's enthusiasm. It was infectious, and his optimism always lifted my mood. All right, I'll be waiting patiently then. I'm looking forward to trying your famous Krabby Patty. SpongeBob gave me a big thumbs up before rushing into the kitchen. I could hear him humming the SpongeBob theme song and banging around pots and pans as he got to work on my Krabby Patty. I couldn't help but chuckle at the sounds coming from the kitchen. And it was endearing. As I waited, I looked around the living room, taking in the familiar surroundings. The Pineapple House was filled with SpongeBob's personal touches, from the pictures of himself on the walls to the various nautical decorations strewn about. After a few minutes, SpongeBob emerged from the kitchen, holding a plate with a steaming Krabby Patty on it. Ta-da! One Krabby Patty just for you! He placed the plate on the coffee table in front of me, his eyes gleaming with excitement. My stomach rumbled in response to the smell of the Krabby Patty. It looked just like it did in the show, golden brown with a perfectly round bun and an enticing juicy patty. Wow, SpongeBob, I exclaimed. That looks absolutely delicious. SpongeBob beamed with pride, clearly pleased that I was impressed by his cooking. Thanks. I put extra love into making it just for ya. He took a seat beside me on the couch, watching eagerly as I took my first bite. He was waiting for my reaction. The moment I took my first bite of the Krabby Patty, I understood why SpongeBob was so proud. The flavors and textures exploded in my mouth, the juicy patty, the soft bun, and the perfectly seasoned secret sauce. It was a truly delicious burger. SpongeBob, I said, my mouth still half full. This is amazing. Seriously, you've got some skills in the kitchen. SpongeBob's grin widened at my praise. He puffed out his chest, the compliment clearly inflating his ego. Hey, thanks. Told ya I was a master at making Krabby Patties. No one can match my skills in the kitchen. He watched as I took another bite, clearly pleased that I was enjoying his creation. I savored each bite, relishing the taste of the Krabby Patty. It was definitely the best one I had ever tasted. You know, SpongeBob, I said, my mouth still partially filled with food, you've made me a fan of your cooking. I might have to come over more often just for your Krabby Patties. SpongeBob chuckled, clearly enjoying the compliments. Hey, anytime you want a Krabby Patty, you know all you have to do is ask. I'm happy to make them for you. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, a sly expression crossing his face. As the evening started to wind down, I knew it was time for me to leave. I stood up from the couch, feeling a sense of contentment after spending time with SpongeBob. Well, SpongeBob, I had a really nice time hanging out with you, I said, smiling warmly. It's always a blast being here. I moved to give him a hug, wrapping my arms around his squishable frame. SpongeBob hugged me back, his arms surprisingly strong considering his soft, porous body. Yeah, it was real nice having you over, Fexa. I always enjoy company, especially from people who appreciate my amazing Krabby Patties. He pulled back, his usual cheerful grin on his face. I chuckled, playfully rolling my eyes at his boastful remark. Of course, we can't forget how great those Krabby Patties are. I'm still savoring the taste of it, honestly. I gave him a final pat on the arm before heading towards the door. I stepped outside the pineapple house, taking a deep breath of the salty ocean air. The night was still and peaceful, the stars twinkling in the sky above. A sense of happiness and contentment washed over me. I had spent the day meeting some of my favorite SpongeBob characters, exploring the town, and enjoying delicious SpongeBob-made food. It was something I would remember for a long time. I began to stroll down the street, my footsteps echoing softly against the pavement in the quiet night, the stars above twinkling like distant jewels. The city was peaceful and still, with most of its inhabitants tucked away in their homes. As I walked, I reflected on the day I had spent in Bikini Bottom. I smiled to myself, feeling grateful for the opportunity to experience the world of SpongeBob firsthand. As I continued walking, a sudden realization hit me like a wave of cold water. In my excitement to explore Bikini Bottom, I had completely forgotten to book a place to stay for the night. Panic began to set in as I mentally berated myself for not being more prepared. Great! Now I was stranded in an unfamiliar town with nowhere to sleep. I paused for a moment, my mind racing as I tried to figure out what to do. The thought of sleeping in jellyfish fields occurred to me, and I suddenly remembered the kindness I had received from the jellyfish earlier in the day. It wasn't exactly a typical accommodation, but it was better than sleeping on the streets. Plus, the jellyfish had been so friendly and welcoming, I figured it was worth a try. I made my way back to Jellyfish Fields, the soft glow of the moon guiding my path. When I arrived, I was once again struck by the ethereal beauty of the place. I settled down on the grass, finding it to be incredibly soft and comfortable, like a luxurious bed. I took a deep breath and let the peacefulness of the surroundings envelope me. Lying there in the soft, glowing grass, I felt blissfully comfortable. The weariness from the day's adventures seemed to melt away, and my eyelids grew heavy with exhaustion. Within a few minutes, I succumbed to the comfort and beauty of the surroundings and drifted off into a deep, peaceful sleep. I slowly opened my eyes, and to my surprise, I found myself not in Jellyfish Fields but in Mr. Krabs' office. Confusion and surprise immediately washed over me, and my heart began racing as I tried to make sense of my surroundings. How had I ended up here? I fumbled with my phone in my pockets and checked the time. It was indeed 3 a.m. on Tuesday. Confusion deepened, and I had to pinch myself to make sure I wasn't still dreaming. I looked around the office, trying to make sense of how I had ended up here. The last thing I remembered was falling asleep in jellyfish fields. As I continued to look around the office, it dawned on me that I was actually inside the Krusty Krab. That explained the faint smell of cooking burgers and the soft hum of machinery in the background. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heartbeat. How did I end up here? Had I sleepwalked my way to the Krusty Krab in the middle of the night? As I peeked through the door windows, I confirmed that the Krusty Krab was empty, just as I would expect it to be at 3 in the morning. I turned back to the door, puzzled by the fact that I was in here when the doors were supposed to be locked. Curiosity and a hint of uneasiness washed over me. How had I gotten into the Krusty Krab at this hour without setting off any alarms? The ominous sound of tires screeching outside the Krusty Krab snapped me out of my thoughts. My ears perked up, and my heart quickened in my chest. Who could be out there this late at night, and why were they screeching their tires? Nervosity crept over me as I tried to peek through the windows to see who was outside. I cautiously opened the office door and stepped out into the dining area. My eyes widened as I spotted the bus outside, its lights reflecting through the windows of the Krusty Krab. Who would be arriving in a bus at 3 in the morning? Curiosity and concern mixed together as I took a hesitant step towards the front door, my mind flooding with unanswered questions. As the bus drove away, leaving behind silence in its wake, my gaze was drawn to a pair of glowing red eyes in the darkness outside. My breath hitched in my throat and my heart thumped heavily in my chest. The glowing red eyes were both menacing and captivating, making me freeze in place for a moment. As the red eyes became clearer, I suddenly recognized the ominous figure standing in the shadows, the hash-slinging slasher from that horror-themed SpongeBob game. My blood ran cold, and dread washed over me. I'd seen the gameplay before, and I knew that this wasn't good news. The hash-slinging slasher was not someone you wanted to encounter at 3 in the morning. The memory of the signs associated with the hash-slinging slasher came flooding back to me. Flickering lights, a phone ringing with nobody on the line, and finally his arrival on the same bus that ran him over. I looked around nervously, expecting the lights to flicker any moment now. Sure enough, as this thought crossed my mind, the lights began to flicker on and off, casting eerie shadows across the dining area. Without a second thought, I bolted back into the office, my heart pounding in my chest. I slammed the office door shut behind me and searched frantically for a place to hide. As I frantically looked around for a place to hide, I recalled another terrifying detail. The hash-slinging slasher had replaced his hand with a spatula after chopping it off accidentally. Panic surged through me, and I desperately looked around for anything that could serve as a weapon or a hiding spot. The office was small and sparsely furnished, offering few places to conceal myself. Peeking through the door windows, I looked out into the dining area and saw the hash-slinging slasher looking around, his glowing red eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of me. Luckily, it seemed like he didn't see me in the office, which meant the office was potentially a safe spot for me in this terrifying situation. As I leaned against the office door, trying to stay hidden, my eyes caught sight of a to-do list tacked to the wall next to me. Normally, a list like that wouldn't be noteworthy, but in this eerie and tense situation, it seemed intriguing. As I read through the to-do list, my eyes widened in surprise. The tasks listed were identical to the objectives in the dreaded SpongeBob horror game. Gather all the money from the cash register in office, pack the leftover Krabby Patties, check the bathroom trash bin for pennies, and lock up and leave. Goosebumps ran down my spine. It was eerily similar, making me wonder if I was truly in the game now. Tearing my gaze away from the to-do list, I turned around and saw the money neatly arranged on the desk. It was right there, waiting to be counted and gathered. My heart pounded as I wondered if this was just a setup, or did I actually need to gather the money? If I did, it meant leaving the safety of the office. Taking a deep breath, I decided that gathering the money on the desk first was the safest bet. It was relatively close to the office and I could grab it without leaving my safe spot. With shaky hands, I reached for the money, collecting it into a neat pile. My heart thumped with every movement, expecting the hash-slinging slasher to appear at any moment. Once I had gathered the money on the desk into a pile, I quickly transferred it into a plastic bag, making sure none of it fell out or spilled. Having secured the money in the plastic bag, I felt a sense of relief, but it was short-lived. The next task was to gather the money from the cash register, which meant venturing out into the dining area where the hash-slinging slasher was. As the lights began to flicker, I froze in place, immediately understanding the warning sign. I knew this meant the hash-slinging slasher was about to spawn in the dining area. Panic surged through my veins and I backed away from the door, staying in the safety of the office for now. I watched the flickering lights anxiously, praying they would stop soon. I watched through the door windows as the hash-slinger slasher spawned once more in the dining area, his glowing red eyes scanning the surroundings. My heart skipped a beat as he looked in my direction, but fortunately, he didn't see me and disappeared soon after. A sigh of relief escaped me as he disappeared, but I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. I had to complete the tasks on the to-do list. Seizing the moment, I quickly rushed out of the office, darting across the dining area to the cash register. My heart thudded heavily in my chest, and I tried to move as silently as possible. Reaching the cash register, I swiftly emptied the cash drawers into another plastic bag, my hands shaking with anxiety. With the second plastic bag full, I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. My gaze darted around the dining area, checking for any sign of the hash-slinging slasher. Thankful that the area still seemed clear, I cautiously made my way back towards the office, clutching the 2 plastic bags of money close to me. As I quickly moved back towards the office, my heart leaped into my throat as I saw the hash-slinging slasher spawn once more in the kitchen. He was mere feet away from where I was standing, and fear clenched at my chest. I held my breath, praying that he wouldn't spot me. Fortunately, he didn't, and vanished into thin air once more. Breathing a sigh of relief after the hash-slinging slasher disappeared, I cautiously entered the kitchen to pack the leftover Krabby Patties. The kitchen was dimly lit, and I shivered as my eyes roamed over the various cooking utensils and equipment. Finding the leftover patties, I quickly packed them into a container, making sure they were neatly organized. With the leftover Krabby Patties safely packed away, I took a deep breath before heading to the bathroom to check the trash bin for pennies. The bathroom was small and cramped, and the eerie silence weighed heavily in the air. Approaching the trash bin, I gingerly lifted the lid, peering inside to look for any pennies that might be lying amidst the garbage. Diving into the trash bin, I wrinkled my nose at the unpleasant smell and began to search through the waste. My hands rummaged through the discarded paper towels and other trash, searching for any sign of a penny. After a few minutes of digging, I finally found a couple of shiny pennies nestled among the trash. As I fished out the pennies from the trash bin, I couldn't help but shake my head and silently question the intelligence of whoever tossed these pennies away. It puzzled me why someone would discard something as valuable as coin currency. I muttered to myself, "Who throws pennies in the trash? These are worth something, you know," as I quickly pocketed the found pennies. With the pennies and leftover Krabby Patties collected, I was left with only one task remaining: locking up and escaping. I made my way back to the office, heart pounding in my chest. Entering the office once more, I quickly looked around for the key. It was essential to find it fast and finish locking up before the hash-slinging slasher spawned again. Relief washed over me as I spotted the key lying on the desk. This was it. This was the end of this nightmarish ordeal. I swiftly grabbed the key, feeling its weight and smoothness in my hand. Turning towards the office door, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the final task, locking up and exiting the now eerie and ominous Krusty Krab. With the key in one hand and the bags of money and leftover Krabby Patties in the other two, I moved towards the front door with a mixture of determination and trepidation. My heart was still racing, and every sense was on high alert, expecting the hash-slinging slasher to appear at any moment. Finally reaching the front door, I fumbled with the key as I unlocked it, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I pushed open the door and stepped outside, the cool night air greeting me like a breath of fresh air. I quickly locked the front door, the click of the lock echoing in the silence. Sighs of relief escaped me as I stood there, holding the bags and the key, the realization that I had completed the tasks and survived this terrifying experience slowly sinking in. As I stood outside the Krusty Krab, the adrenaline from the experience slowly fading, my eyes happened to notice a boat parked in the parking lot. It seemed odd as boats were rarely seen in this parking lot, especially late at summer night. Curiosity piqued, I cautiously approached the boat to take a closer look. It dawned on me that this boat was my ticket to safety, a way to escape this nightmarish night. The memory of the game came rushing back, and I knew that this boat was the key to ending the game. With newfound determination, I dropped the bags of money and leftover Krabby Patties next to the boat and quickly set foot on board. After placing the bags securely in the back seat, I climbed into the driver's seat of the boat. It felt good to be away from the Krusty Krab and closer to escaping this nightmarish scenario. Sitting there, my hands on the wheel, I allowed myself a moment to compose myself before starting the boat. With a sense of urgency, I turned the key in the ignition, and the boat engine roared to life. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, I maneuvered the boat out of the Krusty Krab parking lot at a quick pace, determined to put as much distance as possible between myself and the cursed restaurant. I pushed the boat to its limits, accelerating quickly down the road. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I navigated through the dark, deserted streets. The only sound in the night was the hum of the boat's engine and my own ragged breaths. As I drove the boat down the dark roads, my destination firmly set in my mind, the quiet safety of Jellyfish Fields where I had been staying. I guided the boat at full speed, desperate to reach the sanctuary of my temporary home. The journey seemed to stretch on forever, but finally, the boat glided into the calm waters of Jellyfish Fields. I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling the tension slowly ease as I docked the boat nearby. After bringing the boat to a stop in Jellyfish Fields, I remained sitting in the driver's seat, feeling a mixture of relief and trepidation. Although I was back at my temporary home, the unnerving experience at the Krusty Krab had left its mark, and I didn't feel completely safe just yet. Looking around at the quiet surroundings, I decided that it might be a wise idea to spend the night in the boat. This way, I'd be further away from any potential dangers or unwelcome visitors. Exhausted from the harrowing events of the night, I snuggled down in the boat's seat and allowed myself to drift off to sleep. The rhythmic rocking of the boat and the soothing sound of the nearby jellyfish provided a strange comfort, lulling me into a deep sleep.